If I told you that the fruit sitting in your fridge right now, the one you have eaten 1,000 times, has a hidden trick that almost nobody knows, would you believe me? Stay till the end, because fruit number 7 has a secret that even doctors argue about, and at the end of this video, I am going to give you 10 small puzzles hidden inside these stories. And if you can solve even half of them before I reveal the answers, you know more about fruit than 90% of people watching this right now. Red fruits are not just food. They are little riddles wrapped in color. And today we are cracking every single one of them open. Let's start with a strawberry, the fruit everyone thinks they understand, and almost nobody actually does. Here is the twist that breaks people's brains the first time they hear it. A strawberry is not technically a fruit, and the tiny yellow specks on its skin that you always assume were the seeds are not seeds either. They are actually separate fruit of their own, each one containing a real seed inside it, which means every strawberry you have ever eaten was secretly hundreds of fruits pretending to be one. Now here is where most people eat it wrong. They wash strawberries after cutting off the green top, but that little cut creates an opening that lets water rush straight into the flesh, diluting the sugar and washing away flavor before you even take a bite. The correct way is to rinse them whole, stems still attached, then remove the top after they're dry. There is also a mystery buried in this fruit that scientists still debate. Strawberries contain a compound that can interact strangely with certain blood-thinning medications, yet nobody agrees on exactly why the effect is so inconsistent from person to person. So here is your first puzzle. If a fruit is made of hundreds of smaller fruits fused into one shape, and each one holds a single seed, how many individual fruits do you think exist inside just one single strawberry? Take a guess and remember your answer, because we are coming back to this later. Next is the watermelon. A fruit so common that people assume there is nothing left to learn about it. But that assumption is exactly the trap. Most people cut watermelon into random triangle wedges and toss the rind straight into the trash, unaware that the pale green and white part just beneath the red flesh is completely edible and is actually loaded with an amino acid that supports blood flow, something the sweet red center barely contains at all. There is also a strange debate around the black seeds. An old wives' tale claims a watermelon will grow in your stomach if you swallow one, which is biologically impossible. Yet the myth is so old that it appears in stories from different cultures separated by oceans, and nobody has ever traced exactly where it started first. Eating watermelon straight from the fridge also destroys a chunk of its nutritional punch, because certain compounds inside it are better absorbed by your body at room temperature, meaning the ice-cold slice you love at a summer barbecue is actually the least effective way to eat it. Here is puzzle number 2. If the rind is edible and rich in a compound that supports circulation, and the red flesh is mostly water and sugar, which part of the watermelon do you think nutritionists secretly wish more people would actually eat? Now, let's talk about pomegranates, a fruit that intimidates half the people who buy it because they have no idea how to open it without turning their kitchen into a crime scene. The mystery here is ancient. Pomegranates appear in Greek mythology, religious texts, and old trade records from thousands of years ago, and historians still argue about which specific fruit was originally called the forbidden fruit in old stories, with pomegranate being a stronger candidate than the apple in several ancient interpretations. The biggest mistake people make is try to pick out each seed by hand one at a time, wasting 10 minutes and staining their fingers, when the actual fast method is to cut the fruit in half, hold it seed side down over a bowl, and smack the back with a spoon so the seeds fall out in seconds. Another mistake is throwing away the white membrane thinking it is bitter and useless, when in reality it carries a different set of plant compounds than the juicy seeds themselves. Here is puzzle number 3 for you. Ancient scholars debated which fruit truly started the story of temptation in old religious texts. So, based on everything you know about this fruit's appearance and history, which fruit do you personally think is a real answer? Keep that theory in your head. Red apples come next, and this is where things get genuinely strange. Most people eat an apple by biting straight into it and completely ignoring the core, but the mystery is that apple seeds contain a compound which, when broken down by digestion, can release a substance chemically related to cyanide. Before you panic, the amount in a few seeds is far too small to hurt you. Your body would need an extreme number of crushed seeds to cause any real danger. But the fact that a fruit this common holds a compound this dangerous in tiny form is something almost nobody realizes while eating breakfast. The wrong way most people eat apples is peeling off the skin, unaware that a huge portion of the fiber and plant compounds sit directly in that thin red layer, meaning the peeled apple you thought was a healthy choice was actually the weaker version all along. Here is puzzle number 4. If a handful of crushed apple seeds could theoretically be dangerous, but a single swallowed seed is essentially harmless, how many whole apples worth of seeds do you think a person would realistically need to crush and consume before it became an actual concern? Think about that number. Cherries are next, small, sweet, and deceptively complicated. The biggest mistake people make is eating cherries in large handfuls without realizing that the pit inside contains the exact same seed compound found in apple seeds. Except cherry pits are far more likely to be accidentally swallowed whole because of how quickly people eat them while distracted. There's also a widely repeated claim that cherries can help people sleep better because of a natural compound linked to the body's internal clock, and while there is some real science behind it, the amount naturally present in a normal serving is much smaller than supplement companies want you to believe, which means the sleepy effect people report after eating cherries is partly real and partly a placebo created by marketing. Sweet cherries and tart cherries are also frequently confused at the grocery store, yet they come from different varieties entirely and carry different levels of natural compounds, something almost no shopper actually checks before buying a bag. Here is puzzle number 5. If tart cherries are the ones more strongly linked to that sleep-supporting effect, and sweet cherries are the ones most commonly sold in stores, which type do you think most people are actually eating without realizing they picked the less effective one? Raspberries deserve their own mystery entirely, because unlike almost every other fruit on this list, a raspberry is hollow in the center. When you pick a raspberry off the plant, it's separated from a small white core that stays behind, which is why the fruit has that unusual dimple hollow shape instead of a solid center like a strawberry. This hollow structure is also exactly why raspberries spoil faster than almost any other fruit in your kitchen, sometimes going soft or moldy within just 2 or 3 days. Yet most people store them the wrong way by sealing them tightly in a container, trapping moisture inside that hollow shape and speeding up the exact decay they were trying to prevent. The correct method is to keep them loosely covered with airflow and only wash them the moment before eating, never before storing. Here is puzzle number 6. Since the hollow center is the reason raspberries trap moisture and spoil so quickly, what do you think would happen if you store raspberries completely uncovered in an open bowl instead of sealed container? Better or worse? Decide before we reveal it. Red grapes are next, and here's a detail that surprises almost everyone. The skin of a red grape contains a compound that has been studied for its connection to heart health and longevity, and it exists in far higher concentration in the skin than in the juicy center, which means a common habit of peeling grapes for children or picky eaters accidentally removes almost all the fruit's most talked about benefit. Frozen red grapes are also treated by most people as just a fun snack, but freezing them slows the breakdown of certain natural compounds, meaning a frozen grape can actually retain more of its beneficial content over time compared to one left out at room temperature for days. There's also confusion around grape seeds. Some people spit them out automatically without even knowing why, assuming they're simply unpleasant, when in reality seeded grape varieties often carry a stronger concentration of plant compounds than the seedless varieties bred purely for convenience and mass supermarket appeal. Here is puzzle number 7. If seedless grapes were specifically bred for convenience rather than nutrition, and seeded grapes naturally carry more of the plant's original compounds, which type do you think was more common 100 years ago before mass agriculture changed what shows up on store shelves? Cranberries come next, and almost everyone only knows them in one form, the sweetened dried version or the sugary sauce served once a year. The mystery here is that fresh raw cranberries are shockingly bitter and almost inedible on their own, which is exactly why food companies drench them in sugar before selling them. And that sugar coating is so heavy that a serving of sweetened dried cranberries can contain nearly the same sugar content as a small portion of candy, completely disguised behind a reputation of being a health food. The wrong way people eat cranberries is assuming the dried, sweetened version delivers the same benefit as the fresh raw fruit, when the sugar processing dramatically changes what you are actually consuming. There is also a persistent claim about cranberry juice supporting urinary tract health, and while there is a kernel of real science behind certain compounds in the fruit, most commercial cranberry juice is so diluted and sweetened that the amount of active fruit content remaining is far lower than people assume from the label alone. Here is puzzle number 8. If raw cranberries are naturally too bitter for most people to eat plain, and the sweetened versions hide large amounts of added sugar, What do you think is the one method that could let someone get the fruit's benefit without either the bitterness or the hidden sugar? Red dragon fruit is next, and this one hides a genuinely funny mystery inside it. If you eat a lot of red dragon fruit, specifically the red flesh variety rather than the white flesh one, your body can produce a harmless but startling reaction the next day that makes waste appear reddish in color, which has sent more than a few confused people rushing to a doctor in a panic before realizing it was just the fruit's natural pigment passing through completely unprocessed. Most people also cut dragon fruit incorrectly, slicing it into cubes while the skin is still attached and struggling to peel each piece afterward, when the far easier method is to slice the fruit in half and scoop the flesh out with a spoon directly from the skin, the same way you would eat a ripe avocado. The pigment responsible for that vivid red color inside the fruit is the same category of compound found in beets, which is exactly why the two produce such a similar visual effect once they pass through your system. Here is puzzle number 9. Since the red pigment in dragon fruit and the red pigment in beets belong to the same family of compound, if someone ate both beets and red dragon fruit on the same day, do you think the reaction the next day will be stronger, weaker, or exactly the same as eating just one of them alone? The final fruit on this list is a tomato, and this is the one that causes actual arguments at dinner tables around the world. Botanically speaking, a tomato is 100% a fruit because it develops in the flower of the plant and contains seeds. Yet in the United States, a very old legal case from the 1890s officially classified the tomato as a vegetable for tax and trade purposes, and that ruling still technically stands today, which means science and law have been disagreeing about this exact fruit for well over a century. Most people eat tomatoes completely raw, thinking that is the healthiest possible way. But cooking a tomato actually increases the availability of one of its most talked about plant compounds, meaning that jarred tomato sauce you assumed was the less healthy option compared to a fresh salad might actually deliver more of that specific compound than eating the tomato raw ever could. There is also a common habit of removing tomato seeds before cooking, believing they are bitter or unnecessary, when in reality most of that gel-like substance surrounding the seeds carries flavor compounds that chefs specifically try to preserve rather than discard. Here is puzzle number 10, and the final one of the video. If a court ruling from over 100 years ago legally called a tomato a vegetable despite science calling it fruit, do you think that same ruling would happen today if the case were brought to court again in modern times, or do you think science would finally win? Now it is time to go back through everything and reveal every single answer, so let's settle these one by one exactly in order. For the strawberry puzzle, a single strawberry typically contains somewhere between 100 and 200 of those tiny individual fruits fused across its surface, meaning every strawberry you have ever bitten into is really a cluster of up to 200 separate fruits disguised as one. For the watermelon puzzle, nutritionists have specifically pushed for people to stop discarding the rind because it carries a meaningfully higher concentration of that circulation supporting amino acid than the sweet red flesh most people obsess over, which is why blended watermelon rind smoothies have quietly become a trend among health-focused eaters. For the pomegranate puzzle, there is no single confirmed answer since ancient texts were never explicit about the exact fruit, but pomegranate consistently ranks as one of the strongest historical candidates alongside fig, largely because it was native to the exact region where those old stories were written, while apples were far less common there at the time. For the apple seed puzzle, researchers estimate a person would need to crush and consume roughly several dozen apple seeds all at once, far beyond what anyone would naturally swallow by accident, before the compound would reach a genuinely dangerous level in the body. For the cherry puzzle, the sleep-supporting effect is far more strongly linked to tart cherries specifically, yet the vast majority of cherries sold in grocery stores are the sweet variety, meaning most people chasing that sleepy effect from a regular grocery bag are likely getting a much weaker version of what they are hoping for. For the raspberry puzzle, storing raspberries loosely uncovered actually helps them last longer than sealing them tightly, because airflow prevents the trapped moisture that speeds up mold growth inside that hollow center. For the grape puzzle, seeded grapes were overwhelmingly the standard for most of human history, and seedless varieties are a relatively recent development shaped almost entirely by consumer convenience rather than any nutritional advantage. For the cranberry puzzle, the closest thing to a perfect solution is eating fresh raw cranberries blended into something like a smoothie with naturally sweet fruit added instead of refined sugar, which preserves far more of the original compound, while cutting out the heavy processed sugar found in dried versions. For the dragon fruit puzzle, eating both beets and red dragon fruit on the same day can actually intensify the reaction the next day, since both are delivering the same category of pigment into your system at once, which is a detail that has confused more than one person who ate a beet salad and dragon fruit smoothie on the very same day. And finally, for the tomato puzzle, most legal experts agree that if the same case were brought to court today, food classification would very likely lean far more heavily on scientific definitions than it did over a century ago, meaning the outcome could easily be different in a modern courtroom. If you got even 3 of those 10 puzzles right before I revealed them, you genuinely know your fruit better than most people ever will. And if you got all 10, you should probably be writing the script instead of watching it. Red fruits have been hiding these little secrets in plain sight the entire time, sitting quietly in fruit bowls and grocery aisles, waiting for someone to actually ask the right questions.